Good day everyone, this is your European Open briefing for Thursday, September 22nd, 2016. I'm Rafi Barjan, currency analyst at xm.com, and we're going to be looking at what's happening in the currency markets today. So the main news in today's Asian session and of course at the start of European trading is of course what the Fed decided yesterday. We saw the Fed hold rates at a range of between 0.25% to 0.5 percentage points. They did signal one rate hike in 2016, and the overall tone of the statement was hawkish, but downwardly revised outlook in its latest quarterly projections is currently weighing on the dollar. We had more central bank announcement. The RBNZ met earlier today. They kept rates at 2% as expected, and we also saw the new RBA governor give his first hearing before the Australian Parliament. In other news, we saw crude oil make more sharp gains yesterday on the back of a bigger than expected drawdown in US crude stocks. Now let's have a look in more detail at what the Fed said yesterday. In a statement, the Fed said the case for an increase in the federal funds rate has strengthened, and we saw 3 members vote for an immediate rate hike. This was the highest number of dissent since December 2014, and this pretty much indicates that we will likely see a rate rise in December. In the meantime, though, Yellen was slightly more cautious. She said the economy has a little more room to run and that there is still some slack in the labor market. Her remarks did weigh on the dollar a little bit, but also the dollar came under pressure because of a downward revision to the FOMC's longer run projections of the federal funds rate. They lowered their expectations from 3% to 2.9%, and the growth forecast, the longer run growth forecast was also revised down from 2% to 1.8%. We saw the dollar slide further down. It was already under pressure from yesterday's Bank of Japan decision. And as we saw yesterday, the Bank of Japan announced an overhaul of its monetary policy, but markets weren't quite convinced whether or not this would be effective. And on top of that, we saw the Fed's weaker than expected projections, and this dragged the dollar down to just above 100 yen. And it basically hit a 4-week low during today's Asian session. Now moving on to the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, they held rates at 2%. We've already seen 2 cuts this year. The last one was back in August. The August statement wasn't as dovish as their previous statements, but in today's meeting, even though they held rates, we saw quite a dovish statement out of the RBNZ. They said that further policy easing will be required to ensure that future inflation settles near the middle of the target range. We saw the New Zealand dollar fluctuate after the announcement. It had already been boosted by the dollar slide beforehand, but we did see the Kiwi settle around 0.7340 at the start of European trading. Now moving on to the Australian dollar. The Australian dollar has been rising steadily over the past 2 days. The new governor, Philip Lowe, spoke before the Australian Parliament for the first time since his appointment. He did indicate that a lower exchange rate would be helpful, and if growth weakens and inflation remains low, that rates could be cut further. But his overall assessment of the Australian economy was fairly upbeat, and this helped the Aussie hit a 2-week high of 0.7665 early in Asian session today. Now looking at crude oil, we saw crude oil make more sharp gains yesterday, and it extended its gains today. WTI futures hit a 1.5-week high of $45.88 a barrel. Brent crude was back about $47, and this was due to a much bigger than expected drawdown in US crude and gasoline stocks, according to the EIA inventories data for the week ending September 18. And all looks set to end the week pretty much on a positive note. And now looking at what's coming up in the markets later in the day, it's going to be a fairly light calendar day. It is a national holiday in Japan, but there's also very little European data. So the main data to watch out for will in fact be the weekless jobless claims out of the US, as well as the existing home sales. But also we do have some Eurozone data later in the day. The flash consumer confidence index is due at 14 hours GMT. That's it from today. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.